Welcome, everybody, to Indiana Basketball Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your co-host for Indiana Basketball Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. And right now I want to welcome in my co-host, who, as you all know, is a legend in Indiana basketball lore. 1981 national champion, Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, probably the best 10th man to ever play for Coach Knight at Indiana, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
Best 10th man? I'm down to 10th. I'm up to 10th man now?
Well,
I'm ahead of Michael Fave now.
Ahead of who?
That's great. Okay. Michael Fave.
Yeah. I don't remember Michael.
He was the 11th man. So,
okay.
Yeah. You wouldn't.
We got a special guest today, and if everybody notices, we've had Rob Johnson on. We've had Yogi Ferrell. All these guys scored a lot more points than Steve Risley. And today we have a man that joined Indiana in 1985-86 season, and he also has more career points than Steve Risley. Help me welcome to the show, Todd Jadlow. How you doing, Todd?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Let's start from the start. You're from Salina, Kansas. You ended up going to Barton Community College, and Coach Knight was known not to recruit junior college players until around that time. I think you were one of the first ones he did recruit.
Yeah.
How did you end up at IU? What was the recruiting process?
That's an interesting question because I had always planned on. I had my sights set on going to KU or K-State coming out of high school, and they had incoming seniors, pretty much full classes coming back, and Larry Brown's the one who actually talked to me about going to junior college for 1 year and then coming into the University of Kansas. So he kind of helped in the process, and we settled on Barton County Community College. And I went there, played for a great coach by the name of Jerry Mullen, who's got a huge recruiting service now throughout the United States, 4 major colleges, and played for Coach Mullen, and then got an opportunity to be recruited by Indiana during the season and ended up taking a visit to Indiana. And on my visit, and this is still not quite sure how it all happened, I remember being in the hotel room at the Student Union, which is where we stayed during my visit, and about 11 o'clock at night, I get a knock on the door, as I was in bed saying, "Hey, Coach wants to see you in his office, Assembly Hall." I'm like, man, it's 11 o'clock at night. And so they took me to Assembly Hall, and I sat up there with Coach till a little after midnight talking. And next thing I know is we're walking down the ramp at Assembly Hall, and he's pretty intimidating figure, puts his arm around me and says, "So, son, are you coming?" And me not knowing what to say, I just blurted out, "Sure." And the next thing I know is on that plane going back to Kansas City at 7 a.m. in the morning to let everybody know that I was going to Indiana. So to this day, I still don't know why and why it happened so quickly and why I answered yes, whether it was just an intimidation or whether I really liked it. But to be quite honest with you, I was a kid from middle of Kansas who really didn't watch much basketball. I maybe watched 1 game a year outside the NCAA finals. Didn't know anything about Indiana history. I knew very little about Coach Knight other than that he had been the Olympic team coach, and my whole goal in life was to become a professional athlete, and I just thought that was the best opportunity I had to make that dream come true. So I ended up going to IU kind of on a quick whim, I guess.
All right. So
that's amazing. Let me just say, because how I ended up going to IU was this. I was pretty highly recruited. Knight had been to a couple of my games, but he never really spoke to me after the games in high school. And I'm coming home in the spring one day, and I walk in because I don't do spring sports. I just did football and basketball. I walk in, and the phone's ringing in our house, and I'm the only one there. So I pick up the phone, and the voice says, "Is this Steve Risley?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, this is Coach Knight." I'm like, "Yeah, right." Figured it was some of my idiot friends. And, so I said, "Yeah, okay, sure, Coach. What can I do for you?" And the voice became, you knew what his voice sounded like. So you heard him yell at everybody else. And he literally got on the phone, and the first conversation I ever had with him, he talked to me a little bit about IU for about 10 minutes. And, of course, we all knew about the 76 team. And like Todd said, walking down the ramp, I was on the phone. He said, "Well, do you want to come play basketball in Indiana?" And I had actually almost verbally committed to play at Notre Dame. I had the opportunity to maybe play some football and basketball at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to Digger Phelps about going to Kelly Trapuka, Orlando Woolridge.
Right.
They had a great team being formed, and Digger wanted me to come up there and play. Devine said I could try football for a year because I was a fairly good quarterback, but I had to make a choice. That's my freshman year, which way I wanted to go, and they would make the choice for me, obviously. But he just asked me, he said, do you want to come play at Indiana? And like Todd said, out of intimidation or whatever, I just said, sure. I had not talked to my AD. I had not talked to my high school basketball coach. I had not talked to my parents. And I just said, yes, I'll come play at Indiana. And that, I don't know if that's the magnetism he had or the fear he put in you of not saying no to him. But that's interesting, Todd, that I had almost the same experience of being recruited to play at Indiana. And then I had to go explain and I said, Coach, the only thing I got to tell you is I kind of verbally committed to Notre Dame. He goes, well, did you sign anything? And I'm like, no, I didn't sign anything. I'm not signing anything. He goes, yeah, okay, well, I'll handle Digger. Don't worry about that. And it's hilarious to hear you tell that story because it's almost identical to how I got recruited to play at Indiana.
Yeah, it became a big deal with Larry Brown because I had pretty much same thing, verbally committed to going to KU, and I remember Coach telling me he's going to handle that, the same thing, and they got into a big verbal war that went out into the media on some of the things that Larry Brown had said to me after I committed to Indiana, so it's very ironic that they're very parallel.
Yeah, well, see, Digger he was fun about it because we played Notre Dame at Market Square Arena that my freshman year, and Digger came up to me and gave me a bunch of crap, but he was all in fun and games. I mean, it was because Knight and Digger were good friends, and they enjoyed each other's company. But it's hilarious to hear you tell that story and how close my recruiting story to Indiana was. That's see, there's a method to his madness, is what I've always said about Knight. There's just a method. He's so methodical about how he does things. We just never see the methodology. We just see the madness.
Right.
That's funny.
Go
ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
You get Indiana in 1985-86 season. What was the transition from Barton Community College to Indiana? And I suppose it was probably a little bit of culture shock.
Well, it was a big shock, especially coming from. I thought I played for a fiery coach, and Jerry Mullen in Barton County had that Coach Knight-like reputation. I think the biggest difference was that Mullen, didn't employ the aspect of mind games like Coach did, but all the yelling and the screaming, it was pretty much such that my first year at Indiana was the year that Fine Street wrote the book Season on the Brink, and I thought about 2 months into the season, what did I get myself into here? I remember it gotten, back during those days, Steve can attest, you didn't have all these rules, the way practice, or how many hours you could spend in the gym, and I remember literally New Year's Eve that year going to practice at 11 a.m. at night, and Coach getting upset and saying, you guys are going to practice for 24 hours straight. We literally did. We practiced one day straight with like an hour and a half break between each practice because he wasn't in a good mood. But about halfway through that, my good friend Delray Brooks had come to the realization that he thought it was time for him to go, and I'd actually spoke to Delray after he had made the decision to go to Providence to play for Patino. I had asked Delray to speak with Patino, and Patino actually had opened the door for me to leave too. So I remember calling my parents and saying, I just don't think this is the right place for me. I'm not having fun. This is just the atmosphere here. We weren't very good as a team, and it's kind of the height of who Coach Knight was then and some of the antics that went on. And my parents told me that, you start in Indiana, you're going to stay there. So I just kind of fought through it and learned, the culture and the way Coach was and just dealt with it for the next 3 years. But I almost didn't make it. And I speak about that in my book, my first year there, which was the year that Fine C wrote that book. So it wasn't so much a culture shock. It was just a shock of how things were to transpire in Indiana, I guess, compared to what I went to, my first year in junior college.
Steve? I thought you were.
Yeah, and all I can say is that. Well, no, I mean, I don't want to be I'm not the star of this interview. Todd is, because we're talking about Todd. But in my defense, I had the privilege or the knowledge of living in Indianapolis, where I had read every article about Bob Knight, and I knew probably more than what Todd did about what
I knew
I was
nothing
getting
about
into.
Coach.
Yeah,
I
see,
knew
we had heard
people
the
laugh
stories.
at that.
Yeah,
Say,
we had heard the stories and we had read everything. And Mike, I know you were very prominent, in the sports world at that point in time too. You still are, but we knew what Knight was about when I went there. I was a little better prepared to deal with his mentality than say somebody
Steve,
like from Kansas.
Steve, real quick,
yeah.
I want to disagree with you a little bit there, because
okay.
The way
you mean say you're not very prominent in the sports world?
Just sure, that too, whatever. Be funny, all right? That's all that matters to Steve, is to be funny. Ha ha. I'm just kidding, Steve. But you remember Indiana, 70s and 80s? I don't think that even the kids that lived in Indiana really knew what they were getting into, because I think most of the media in Indiana was intimidated by Knight. And I don't remember reading too many stories about how bad he was, other than he yelled a lot. But he won and he got
Very
results,
good point.
and that's what people saw. So
right.
I think
what we saw was the fieriness of him that we saw on WTTV4 with Chuck Marlowe doing the games, and we saw the antics that Todd didn't have the privilege of seeing, because in Kansas, this isn't Kansas anymore, Dorothy. You're not in Kansas anymore. It's like the Wizard of Oz land out there somewhere, Emerald City. But they have the best steaks and ribs in the world. I'll give you that for Kansas City. But so we still had more acumen as to what he was about. Now, I agree. When I walked into my first practice, I had no freaking clue what I had just done. Because I'm like thinking, oh my God, I could be at UCLA right now, living out in Pepperdine or somewhere out in Malibu, in Westwood, and living the high life. Instead, I'm here now getting my brains beat out. Because I've often said to people, leaving high school was going from getting patted on the ass to going to IU was getting kicked in the ass. And it was an entirely different mentality. So I have more knowledge than Todd had the privilege of knowing, but I still was not expecting what I was going to find for the next 4 years, no doubt.
And when I look at this, Steve, and I just watched the 30 for 30 again, and I was somebody, Todd, who was a huge IU fan. Bobby Knight could do no wrong. I was a teenager growing up in the 80s. I'd have given my left arm to play for Bobby Knight. Unfortunately, I wouldn't study for tests and get good grades to it, so I ended up at Indiana State. But when I look at this, and I go back and I start to really think about this, you talk about that 85-86 team with Delray Brooks, who goes to Providence. Ricky Callaway ends up leaving after winning a national championship. I think there was a change somewhere between when Steve was there and maybe the 85 team, because if you remember, the 85 team ended up playing in the NIT, and I think they were like 17-12 that year. And then I think 86, Knight stepped up even from what he did before, because he was so embarrassed about what had happened the last year or two there.
Yeah. And I have to agree. That tape that ESPN played where he's speaking in the locker room saying, you guys aren't going to put me through another 8-10 season losing. I heard that speech, the exact same one, at least 2 of the 4 years I was there, and I know for a fact my first year there, 85-86, I heard that speech that year, because the year before they weren't that good and did end up going to the NIT. So you're right.
Yeah.
Well, here I'll say this: I heard that speech too, and I listened. I don't know if I was maybe been in the locker room when that occurred. I don't know if I just heard it so many times on the radio being played. I am not going to go 14-13, and you're not going to put me through this again. I'll go to the Hybrid building and get players. And I'm thinking, and here's the way I describe it to people about the 4 years with Coach, playing for Coach Knight. The first year you're there, you're absolutely in awe of everything. You're playing in front of 18,000 people every game. You're going on campus. You're like BMOG, big man on campus, BMOC, big man on campus. You're walking around. Everybody just loving on you and everything because you're a player. You're in awe. Every game's televised. Your second year, you go into it, and now you're scared to death because you know what's coming. You don't know why it's coming or when it's coming, but you know it's coming, and it's not going to be pretty. So you're just scared to death. Your junior year, you start scratching yourself on the head and going, I've seen this shit somewhere before. This is a repeat of the last 2 years. And then your senior year, you're laughing at the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors who haven't figured it out yet. That it's all just motivational way he motivates people. And it's the guys that got over that and could look at it that way that were the ones that succeeded at IU. But it's so methodical in his approach to how he does things that, but again, it was hilarious because to hear you talk like that, but there's a process to what he does all the time.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think the way you described it, you hit it right on the nail. The first year you're kind of in awe and you don't know what to expect. The second year you know exactly what's getting ready to come. The third and the fourth
you
year,
just know you're going to get your ass kicked or something. You don't know why.
And how to manage
have no
things.
idea.
Right.
It's going to hurt. Whatever is going to happen is going to hurt today. It's just going to hurt.
Well, as soon as he walks in that locker room, if he's got his head down, strolling, he's got a paper in his hand, you didn't know what was going to happen that day.
It's not going to be pretty.
Somebody did miss class or somebody had not done something or done something they weren't supposed to be doing. So every day was a wonder, what's today going to be like? And, the year
because you got to give him credit, Todd. You have to admit this. If one person screwed up, the team paid for it.
Everybody did. Absolutely.
Everybody paid for it. So.
And I tell this story, I think I talked about in my book, that first year there, Daryl Thomas kept missing class. And I think with Coach, if you miss class and you're getting good grades, nothing was ever said. But if you were getting a C or flunking or a D, there's hell to be paid for it. And you're right about that. If somebody missed a class, it wasn't that person who paid the price. It was the rest of the team that paid the price. And a lot of times, that person sat and watched everybody else, pay the price for the mistakes of that. I mean, that kind of became his whole concept, and my theory of what it takes to develop a team as a true team. It's not about an individual; it's about everybody. And everybody's going to pay, the price, or everybody's going to bask in the glory. It's not going to be one way or the other.
Yeah, you're going to win together. You're going to die together.
You're right.
That's why he created great basketball teams and not great basketball players necessarily. He created great basketball teams. Yeah.
All right, so
Mike?
1986-87, 86-87, Indiana wins the national championship. You were redshirted. What was the reason for the red shirt? Because I don't remember.
I had ankle surgery right at the beginning of the season, and decided to keep me out, and I rehabbed first part of the season in getting my head. A lot of ankle issues, which ironically I just had one of them replaced 3 weeks ago, or the second one replaced. But I ended up having surgery on my ankle, and that kind of did me in for that season. And it wasn't a bad thing. I got to sit and watch and practice a lot and learn a lot more from Coach and the way things are done there. So.
All right, and then you guys went on to win the national championship. Did that bother you at all that you weren't a part of that, even though you knew?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. I was every bit as part of the team. I traveled with the team, went to, sat in the bench on all the games. The only difference is I didn't suit up for the game, but I was every much as part of the team and battled against Dean Garrett every day in practice. And days of the game, I'd show up, 2 hours before the game time, and they put me through a practice on my own. So it was a year of getting better, getting stronger. It wasn't a bad thing at all. So no, I felt very much included and felt that I did my part in helping us win.
Yeah, and to talk about that team a little bit, something me and Steve talk about all the time with Colin on our normal Indiana Basketball Weekly show, is that team seemed to have great leadership.
It did. Steve did an incredible job. He was definitely the team leader. there's a saying we had at IU: when you win, it's country club. When you lose, it's pure hell. And 2 of the 4 years I was there, we had really good leadership, and we won. We won a lot more than we lost. But that year with Steve Alford, and the camaraderie of the team was just really good, which makes a huge difference. If you get one person or 2 people that for instance, get in the doghouse and don't handle it the right way, and start bringing everybody down, and next thing you know, cliques started forming, and there's a couple of years there it got really bad in that sense. And I talk about that in my book. I was pretty critical of Ricky Callaway in my book, which Ricky and I are good friends to this day, and that was just my opinion. He understood it and respected it. He's one of the guys that came to my defense after I wrote my book, and was very vocal. And I love Ricky Callaway, but it was just, he got in the doghouse his junior year, and after winning a championship the year before, and I just, didn't handle it that well, and kind of divided the team. And I think, Ricky leaving for his senior year was not only good for him, but it was good for our team as well, because we became a very cohesive unit my senior year. I mean, this is the year we were picked to finish 7th in the Big Ten, and we actually ended up winning the Big Ten outright by 2 games. I think we only lost 2 games that whole year in the Big Ten, and Michigan ended up winning the national championship that year, which we beat them twice at their place and at our place. But we were a great team. Every time we stepped on that court, we knew we were going to win. We knew what everybody was going to do. Everybody knew their role. It was just a very cohesive unit, and we had great leadership again. Joe Hillman was pretty much our leader of the team. It was just a very cohesive unit. No friction outside of the court. Completely different than my junior year with Keith and Dean being the seniors on the team. It was just a great year in my senior year as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people overlook that year when they talk about Knight's best years, because if I remember right, I think you guys started off like 3-4, and you got destroyed by Syracuse. You got blown out by Louisville. You lost double digits to Carolina and Notre Dame. After that, you guys only lost, I think, 3 games. 2 of those were to Illinois. And you talked about Michigan. Illinois played in the Final Four against Michigan. So
we lost Illinois on a last-second shot by Nick Anderson. He heaved it up from half court, and it went in, and we lost.
I remember
that because that's a game that was a 12:00 game, and I ended up getting home at 4 or 5 in the morning. Because after that game, Coach was in one of those rare moves.
Did he take the bus away from you guys?
God. Well, he ripped a sink off the wall in the locker room.
Yeah, no, he ripped the urinal off the wall for us, too. Yeah, we got that, too. He ripped the urinal off the wall for us. So.
Yeah.
Let me ask both of you guys something. Because when we're going through this interview and we hear, well, he did this, he did that, are those things that you guys think helped the team? Or it is something that was just kind of, it happened and it really didn't matter in the overall scheme of things?
My opinion, it was just another day. I'm going to be honest with you. By today's standards, oh my gosh, it would be something huge. But back then, it was just another day. Like, we just have to fight through this, battle through it, and let's get this next game under our belt and put this in the past. But as far as hurting or helping, I don't think it did either. It certainly puts more fear in me, and that's one thing I talk about. Looking back, I don't know that I enjoyed as much playing, because I think we played a lot out of fear of, God, let's get this game, because if we don't, we know what tomorrow practice is going to be like. But as far as the antics, to be quite honest with you, they never really bothered me. Things that bother me when hands will be put on people and things of that nature. But, when you're 18 and 19-year-old kid and you're pretty impressionable, and I remember going to the gym during 2 of those 4 years telling myself on a daily basis, man, this is just a game, Todd. He can't kill you. It is just a game. And being in that mindset, man, I was just already defeated. But as well as the bad times, there were great times as well, where you look forward to get to the gym and you look forward to is Coach going to be in a great mood today? Is it going to be a light practice? So he kind of took the good with the bad. And as far as the antics, they are what they are. Like Steve can probably contest, stuff went on all the time, and it really didn't, I don't think, hurt us or help us one way or the other.
All right, Steve.
Yeah, I concur with Todd. You eventually you get numb to it all.
Right.
I mean, it just
Yep.
you kind of just like it just you understand it's just the environment you're living in, and you adapt to it basically. I mean, and it starts losing its effect to some degree. Like I said, as you progress through your years at IU, when you start seeing things repeat, and to hear Todd tell it, 8 years after I graduated, 7 years after I graduated. It's the same stories. And I know I talked to the guys in the 76 team. They have the same stories that I have. And they're a little more close-knit. They're more Knights Inner Circle than any of us are. But they have the same stories when you sit around the campfire and you talk internally. And we all started chuckling about it. It's all the same story. But you just kind of become immune to it. And basically what I would do is I used to put my head down and close my eyes and say, "Don't worry, Dorothy. There's no place like home. Click your heels together. There's no place like home. There's no place like home." And you just let it go. I mean, you just said that's the environment I live in. And I think it made you stronger down the road. For me, it did.
It does. Absolutely.
Everybody handles it differently. I mean, I can't fault any one player for having whatever opinion they have about playing for Bob Knight. My opinion is very high. It was a great experience for me, but there was tough times. It was very hard. But overall, if I had to rate Coach Knight of my life experiences, he's in the top 10% of all my great. He's the greatest teacher I ever had in my life.
Absolutely.
Nobody ever taught me about anything more than Coach Knight did. And for that, that's what matters in the end is that. And I think I said to him one time in jest, we were at a golf outing somewhere, and he was giving me crap about something, and I said, Coach, I got to give you credit. The one thing you taught me that I will take to my grave is you taught me how not to treat people, and I give you credit for that. And he looked at me with a wry smile and said, "Well, at least I freaking taught you something, Risley." So, and that's the way he responded to that. And that's what he wanted to hear. Well, that's he wanted to hear. But I agree with Todd is that and I'll Todd, see if you agree with me. When you got in practice and you got a compliment from him or got patted on the ass by him, wasn't it like euphoria?
It's big time. Probably the biggest high
big time. When you did something right and he pointed you out for doing something right, you were like, "It's a great day. It's a great day." I got complimented by Coach Knight today. Yeah, it's a great day.
The motivation that one compliment that you got would would just turn your life around. It absolutely would. And you're right about the pat on the back and him saying something good. God, if I had 10 more Jadlows, we'd be a pretty damn. We should feel good.
Yeah, I heard that too. If I had a team full of Risleys, we would be national champions. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Absolutely.
You got Isaiah Thomas on your team. You want a team full of Risleys? Are you nuts?
Do we have a
team full of Alfords?
Do we have a tape of Coach saying that?
No, we don't have a tape of that. I can't verify that.
I want to see the tape. I believe Todd, but I don't believe you.
If I had a goddamn team full of Risleys, if I had a team full of kids that played as hard as Risley plays, but then the next day it'd be if I had a team full of Tolberts, or if I had a team full of, Whitmans, or, whatever.
A team full of Tolberts would beat the hell out of a team full of Risleys.
And I think that was
I think a team full of Tolberts would kill a team full of Risleys, yeah.
All right, so my question is this. ESPN did their 30 for 30 documentary. I just watched it for the second time because I saw it when it originally came out. I wanted to refresh myself about it. When we watched that documentary, I'm sure you guys saw it. Todd?
Yeah.
What did you take away from that? Did that make you feel any different about things, or?
I've become pretty close friends with Robert Abbott, and I spoke to him a lot after my book came out. Spoke to him before the first 30 came out. I can't get through watching that film without shedding a tear immediately when stuff starts going on, thinking, how did I get through all that? And I'm ashamed to say I was that guy back when the whole Neil Reed situation went down, saying this guy's just a wuss. He just couldn't handle the program, and how wrong I was to think that or to feel that way. I sat there and watched Michael Lewis, give that interview, and that was probably the majority of players. And I have a hard time still even dealing with that, because here's a kid who had his dreams shattered and was vilified for telling a story of what went on. He didn't create that. He didn't do that. He paid the ultimate price. He lost everything. And as Steve can attest, man, stuff that goes on there, some people can let it roll off their back, and some people have to live a lifetime asking themselves, why did this happen, or why did this go on? Just watching that 30 for 30, and I've seen it 3 times, I can't get through it without tearing up, hearing the locker room rants, thinking about the times when I was there, some of the things that went on, thinking about the former player that came there and back then I would have said couldn't handle it, ended up leaving. People that ended up leaving, because they were smart enough to understand that they're not going to be treated that way. And I hear everybody say about, know what you're getting into, and you should have been tougher, and you're just a wuss. Why are you talking about it now? There are so many great things about Coach Knight. You'll never hear me say one thing bad about him, that he's taught me values in life and how to handle things. There's also a lot of things that I took from him that were very wrong, and I tried to live my life that way in terms of resentment. If somebody crossed me, that was going to be the first and last time they crossed me, because there isn't going to be a second time, and things of that nature. But that 30 for 30 was an incredible piece. I've got a little bit of hard feelings still after I wrote my book, Jadlow on the Rebound, and just shared my story of some of the things I went through. And 4 of the 36 or 42 chapters are about my time in Indiana. Unfortunately, those are the ones that garnered all the attention in the book. And I was vilified for just telling my story. And my thoughts doing this book is I have hidden so many things. I've kept so many things very private, personal, and I felt I had all these skeletons in the closet that if I was going to do this book, I was going to get 100% honest with myself, with everybody around me, and I was going to clear that closet out, and from that point on, move forward in my life and just put everything in the past. But in doing so, it kind of took me back to those days. And we live in a much different society today than we did back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Back then, I call it tough love. Nobody thought second whether Coach put his hands on you, grabbed you, threw a ball at you, did whatever he wanted to do. But by today's standards, it's thought of very differently, and I think that's why so many people are in awe of how did these guys get through this. I look back now, and I still ask myself a lot of questions. I love Coach Knight to death, always will. But I still, there's still a lot of things that I'm trying to figure out. But my heart goes out to Neil Reed and what he went through, because here's a kid that was just broken. We could see it in that film, and to see his mother, breaking down, man, that was hard. So I even get choked up.
Yeah, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch for me because I remember I never played at IU, but I had the same feelings about Neil Reed when this happened in 2000. I had the same thoughts, and I would say probably 90% of all Hoosier fans did have those thoughts. And that's what's so disturbing when you sit down and watch this, because I remember saying, well, look, he just put his hand on his neck. It's not like he wasn't actually choking him. But that's not the point. The point is, if I send my kid to you as a college coach and you're supposed to take care of him, you probably shouldn't be putting your hands on him. And absolutely. I think I was so blinded by what I saw when I was younger and winning championships, Steve, that, I let the wins be more important than anything else.
Hey, you're absolutely right.
From my perspective, I never saw anything like that out of Knight at IU. We never got to that point, and I don't know why it got to that point with Neil Reed. I always knew that there was a capability of getting to that point because, if Knight didn't want you around IU anymore, you were gone. And he would find a way to eradicate you, or he would find a way to have you eradicate yourself, one or the other. The whole mystery about Knight is that, and again, I like Todd. I have nothing but admiration and love for the guy. I mean, I will defend him to the day I die. But the whole thing about Knight, in my opinion, was he didn't discipline you. He taught you to discipline yourself. And he used that to his advantage, and he used it, and I learned from that. So it's a two-way street there. He didn't discipline us. He didn't tell us to do things. He told us why it was valuable for you to do things this way. And then when you didn't conform with him, then you got disciplined. So I guess maybe in the end, yeah. But he gave you the opportunity to learn from every experience. I never saw anything like what happened to Neil Reed happen. And I've known Bob Knight since 1975 when he first started recruiting me. And so that's 43 years now that I've known him. And, I've had on and off relationships with him. And to this day, like I said, to this day, I will go to my grave defending him if I need to. But he claims he doesn't want that. Whether he does or not, it's not my place to say. But I didn't see it. And when I heard about all the Neil Reed thing, I have to tell you, I was one that said, suck it up.
Right.
Because, then when you watch it on tape, and then what bothered me the most about the situation was not so much the incident that happened because, he smacked all of us. And, I mean, that's smack us. I say, he disciplined. He did his thing. He did his shtick. And we never took anything more that that's his shtick. But then when you see how much Neil Reed was vilified for what happened until the tape came out, then it kind of changed my perception to a little bit of a degree. That there's no right answer here for no justification for what I just saw on tape. There's no way you can justify it.
And
in any way, shape, or form.
The big thing I took away from watching that tape is this. There's an assistant coach that walks by, looks, and keeps going.
Okay, that's what.
Yeah. Nobody.
The normality of it all.
It was normal. That was not the first time that happened. When I look at that,
and that's maybe the greatest takeaway lesson, Mike, is that may be the most poignant part of that video, is that nobody reacts.
Nobody. It was like another
nobody
day
reacts
on the court there. If you watch, everybody just stopped and watched. Doc gets walked away. Felling walked in front. Nobody did anything. It was just another day. That's how times were normal then. That's what normalcy was at IU. That thing that
see if
went
an
on
assistant
for so
coach
long.
all of a sudden runs in and grabs him and says, "Stop it," then I'll think maybe that's the first time that ever happened. But the scary part to me was this. Either it had happened before and everybody thought it was normal, or everybody was so afraid of him they just let him do what he wanted.
Well, first of all,
I go back to saying what I say is I never saw him physically attack or put his hands on any player ever in my era at Indiana. Not when I was being recruited, not in the games I've been after him in the locker room a gazillion times. After I left Indiana, went back, players are always welcome in the locker room. I never saw that incident occur with my own eyes. So,
look, Steve, I can tell you.
A funny story I tell is one night Knight got honked off at Landon's. And he's like, he started trying to get on Landon. So he's like, Landon, you can't play offense. You don't move the ball. So a guy like me can guard you. So Knight gets on the court and actually tries guarding Landon. And that was a mistake because Landon just schooled him. And he went up and dunked over Knight. And Knight went down. And Knight wasn't at practice for the next 2 days because he had ripped his back apart trying to guard Landon. He literally couldn't practice. He couldn't come to practice. He had to be put in tractor. I mean, something, he was laid up somehow, but he wasn't at practice. The assistant coaches ran the next day practice so they could come back. I mean, and we all just, we laughed at that, like, okay, that's what you get for trying to do something you shouldn't be doing. But I never physically ever saw anything happen like that in my tenure at IU. And I've never heard anybody else ever tell a story about like what happened to Neil Reed. So I don't know if that's a one-time incident. It does disturb you a little bit that nobody reacted to it. That's probably the most disturbing part of that whole video. It's not so much because I don't think he hurt Reed so much. I don't think he just grabbed him by the neck, or he grabbed me by the jersey and yanked me over to the right position to be in. Like, Todd, I know, I'm sure he's yanked you in the right position where I want you to be.
Oh, yeah.
And, if you're not help side, you're not man side, you're not ball side, you're, one step man side, one step ball. You know his defensive principles. And he would yank you and put you in position. I didn't see that any more than that. The neck obviously is a focal point, but I don't think it was physical pain or violence to Neil. It was just the emotion of going through and seeing that happen. But I had never seen that before, and I'd never heard anybody tell a story of him ever doing that. So, I wrote it off as just Knight being Knight.
Well, what I can
say, the disturbing part is, like you said, the disturbing part is nobody reacting to it. Right. That's the disturbing part of that whole video.
Well, I talk about in my book a couple of my years, so I don't know if things started to spiral more out of control for Coach after you left, but there were several instances, and I speak about them in my book, and I actually even, believe it or not, share a picture that I even taken, after we had played we were playing Syracuse in New York at Madison Square Garden in the preseason NIT, and Coach gets mad and when you sit down on the bench and he gets up into when you're sitting on a chair and grabs you, or I don't know if he ever did it to you, but he grab you on the side of your groin muscles on both sides and he'll just squeeze hard as hell. And he stood up and same thing, he grabbed you on the side saying, God damn it, you're a freaking senior, you've got to lead these guys. And I actually, had taken a picture, and I don't know why to this day. The next morning I woke up in the hotel there, the Marriott Marquis, right there on Times Square, and taking a picture in the bathroom where you could actually see every visible finger from where he had grabbed me so hard. So I don't know if things started to spiral a little bit more out of control for Coach in terms of him losing his temper after you left, but there were several instances.
I don't think so, because those experiences, and again, it's how you perceive things, Todd. Right. It's like when those happened, I took that in my era. I think guys took that as that was almost an honor to have him do that to you. And I hate to say it that way, but it's like that means he was counting on you to be above and beyond your expectations. And I took it not as I look at life. You can take everything as a tragedy or an adventure. You can look at everything in life. So you can take two paths down every road. It can either be a tragedy, or anything that happens to you, you can make it a tragedy, or you can let it be an adventure. I chose the path to make everything an adventure. Okay, I'm in a hole here. The adventure is getting out of the hole, and not the tragedy that I'm in the hole.
Well, I think we all do when we're going
that way. And so when that happened in my era, when he grabbed you or he
smacked you upside the head,
patted you harder than you wanted to be patted, it's like, okay, the challenge is on me now to live up to his expectations. And I think you'll agree, we all wanted to live up to his expectations.
Right.
But wait a second, though. Hold on. Let me ask this question. Y'all wanted to live up to his expectations. I can't believe I just said y'all. Sound like a Kentucky fan.
Y'all.
But
Lawrenceburg, Indiana.
You all want to live up to his expectations. Let me ask you this, Steve. Why?
Because he was successful. He was a winner. I mean, you knew that he was a great teacher, because you knew that if he followed his direction, you were going to achieve more than anybody else was going to. That's why, the most poignant thing I ever saw was he one time showed us a film of his Army team when he was coaching Army, demolished the South Carolina team that had Kevin Joyce on it. They were the number one team. Frank McGuire was coaching the team. They were the number one team in the country. He took his 6'5" and no taller Army team in and annihilated them. And he showed us the whole film. He said, fellas, this is if you'll follow me and listen to me, this is what you can achieve as a basketball team. And they annihilated South Carolina. And they were the number one team in the country. And so you got that into your head that this guy knows what he's talking about. I mean, he knows what he's doing. And, you know, I didn't feel like I was ever in prison. I didn't feel like it was Russia. I didn't feel like it was communistic. I had a chance to leave anytime I ever wanted to leave if I didn't like what was going on. But he found a way to use negative reinforcement or negative motivation to make you want to work harder for him. And it worked for him. It maybe doesn't work for everybody else.
Wait a second.
But it worked for him.
See, you could also have somebody to say maybe it didn't work for him. I mean, you did have just 3 national championships in, 40 years? And the thing is this, there's a lot of teams there that had an opportunity that didn't get it done. And my question is, when you say that you played in fear, I don't think you can perform at your best playing with fear. I just don't think that's possible.
I never said I played in fear.
Okay.
No, when have I ever said I played in fear? I did not play basketball in fear.
Okay.
The people that played in fear were people who shouldn't have been. Well, yeah, but consequences are just hard work and more punishment. But it wasn't mean I was afraid. I wasn't in fear of anything playing for Knight. I was never in fear. I mean, I was bigger than him. I was faster than him. I was stronger than him. If it came down to, and Knight used to have, and Todd, maybe he used it with you, his old saying to me, this is in our era, was, I'd like to lock you and me in a room and know only one of us is going to come out alive.
Yeah.
I used to look at him and go, okay, let's go. I mean, I never said that to him, but it's like in my mind I thought, okay, let's go because I'm stronger than you, I'm faster than you, I'm bigger than you, and I can be just as ornery as you. So let's go. But I never, you don't say that because he's the alpha male on the court and you're not. But you just learn to deal with it. And again, I go back and I talked to Todd about this when we were kind of doing some pre-work on this. It's like the greatest advice I ever got was from Kent Benson, who, and I know Todd thinks highly of Kent too, who before I went in to meet Knight for the first time at Assembly Hall, he drove me around campus and he looked at me and said, Steve, I'm going to give you one piece of advice and take this to heart and live with it for the rest of your life. Don't listen to how he says things. Listen to what he says. If you get wrapped up in how he says things, you will fail here. You will fail. If you listen to what he tells you, you will be successful for the rest of your life. And I took that, and I never forgot that. And it was tough at first. Like I said, my sophomore year, I questioned that every day I went to practice because that's when I was scared. I wasn't in fear, but I was like, okay, this is not going to be fun. And I always looked at basketball in my life as being fun. And it wasn't at that year. But then you started realizing that it was motivation and it was the way he delivered information. And I went back to what Kent said, stop worrying about how he's delivering information. Just listen to what he's saying. So when you got over that hump, you were fine with him. And that's how you got into his inner circle and got to be, somebody who he would call whenever he came back to Indianapolis to have dinner, and you were one of the people that got called to come and join him for dinner at some obscure restaurant he was having dinner at. So that's my story. That's how I see it. The tragedy here on the show was the vilification of Neil Reed is the tragedy.
And the ongoing cover-up by the IU administration, with some of the medical staff that, after I came out with my book and Bomba
you tell that story because I don't have any part of that story other than,
So after I came out with my book and I shared some of my experiences in those 4 chapters, Dr. Bomba, Rink, Allfeld, and Tim Garl took it upon themselves to put a letter out to the media denying this stuff, saying they are protectors of the student athletes, that at no time did any of this stuff ever transpire. which I found laughable because they were there at every practice, and Garl was involved in one of the instances in which Coach came after me and chased me into the tunnel and subsequently threw Garl to the ground after he had thrown a whole rack of basketballs after him and ripped everything out of my locker and threw it out in the hallway because I missed a dunk in practice. But the IU medical staff comes out with a letter denying that this stuff went on, and that was just a culture. And what's bothersome is here we are in 2017 when my book came out, and they're still at the same place that they were back when Coach was there. And the whole ironic part about it is Andy Katz, who did the Outside the Lines documentary that played on ESPN, who did all the interviewing, called me one afternoon. He says, I want to let you know something, Todd. He said, I just got a call from Dr. Rink, and he feels bad about being involved in that letter because he cannot deny that those things did not go on when you were there, but he just cannot say it publicly. You know, and that even irritates me even more that I don't know what the hold is that Coach has on everybody, whether it's expectations or fear they're going to lose his friendship, and denying some of the things that went on. But to sit there and say you're protectors of the student athlete, none of this stuff went on, is just laughable. You know, Dan Dawkins was another guy that same thing when Andy Katz came out with the interview and did the thing for ESPN. Told Andy at told Andy at ESPN meeting that they're all at is everything Todd said was absolutely true. And Andy said, well, why won't you come out and say that? He said, that's the difference between being public and private. I just can't do it. You know, so I felt like I was kind of vilified just by sharing my experiences there, whether good or bad, because of what I had to say. But for people to sit there in this day and age and still deny that anything went on or this didn't happen is just it's irritating beyond belief. And I've lost a lot of respect for it.
Yeah, well, in responding to that, Todd, those are people that are there to suit their own purposes, and they don't want to destroy the opportunity of being there.
Sure.
They have too much to lose by going against Coach's wishes when he was there, and they're going to blindly follow. I don't think there's a player out there that thinks Knight is perfect. I don't think any former player, and I can't speak for the guys in '76 and the guys before that, and the absolute godlike ascendance of Indiana basketball, justifiably. But I still think in private, they'll tell you there are flaws everywhere, but there's flaws with everybody. But how I perceived it, what I saw was what Knight really wanted from me. He wanted me to stand up to him. And he wanted me. The minute you did is when you earned his respect. That the people who would cower and run away and hide, he would dog you until you either run away for good, you left, or you would stand up to him. And I remember my senior year, I was playing. I started the game. I'd had a good start to the season. I started against Kentucky. Kentucky came to Indiana, and they drilled us, and they killed us. And it was dead silent at Assembly Hall. And I had played very poorly. I had not had a good game. I had a good early part of the season. It started all the games, and it was being a factor, and they just came in and drilled us. And at the end of the game, he yanked me out of the game, and he sat me down. I went down and sat at the end of the bench, and I was in tears because this is the last time I was going to play Kentucky. And he came down, and at that point, he cared no longer about the game. He was going to get into my head. And he lit me up as I'm sitting there with a towel over my head, just heartbroken that I'm losing to Kentucky, the last time I ever going to play Kentucky. And the Assembly Hall's dead silent. Everybody's hearing what he's saying. I mean, he's yelling and screaming, and they're hearing it. And I'm just taking it. I just sat there and kept my head down. And finally, I looked up at him, and I'm going to say it on the air. I just looked at him and said, "Fuck you." And I put my head back down. I thought, This is going to hurt. He's going to hit me, and it's going to hurt. But he didn't. He got up and walked away. And it's almost like the next day the relationship with Bob Knight and I became completely different. I was still in the doghouse for playing badly, but there was like this different era of respect that came over by me just looking at him and saying that to him. Like, I didn't want to hear any more of it. I'd had enough of it. I was a senior. It was my last year. I lost one of the most important games that I'm ever going to play at that point in my life. And I looked at him and said, don't do this to me now. Get away. And I stood up to him. And that's probably the first time I ever verbally stood up to Knight in my career at IU. And he like I said, it was a completely different relationship. The next thing you have to realize, Knight never wanted you to be his friend, and he never wanted to be your friend. He never wanted to be friends with you. That wasn't his job. His job was to coach you and teach you. And there was no friendship there at all when you were playing for him. Whenever you ever got called in the locker room, you knew it wasn't a good thing. Right, Todd?
Either that or late at night to Assembly Hall. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I got the early calls, too, in the morning. Mary Ann would call and say, Coach wants you in the office at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, Mary Ann, what do I do now? He goes, we'll see you at 8, Steve. Okay.
Absolutely.
And you knew it wasn't going to be good. It was not there to tell you how great a game you had the night before or anything like that. So you just learn to adapt and take it. But the minute he challenged you to stand up to him and be a man and that's where I struggled with the Neil Reed thing until I saw the video. And really, I just said, not like you, I said, be a man. Just own it and take up to it. There had to be a reason why he did what he did. But then the vilification of Neil Reed is what just changed everything for me in terms of that incident and what happened. But I have to say, I never saw that happen in my era of Indiana basketball. Mike?
I don't know, Steve. I mean, my opinion on this whole matter has changed in the last 3.5 hours. I can tell you this. I've coached for the last 30 years, everything from my son's pee-wee team to professional football. And all I know is this. And it doesn't matter what it was in 1993 or today. You don't put your hands on people. You don't verbally assault people. You don't threaten people. And if that's what you have to do to win, it's not worth winning. And my opinion of Coach Knight was always he was the greatest coach I ever saw. My opinion, after talking to multiple guys that played for him, whether it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or today, is that, the end didn't justify the means, or the means didn't justify the end. And I just wonder, with being maybe the greatest basketball coach, X's and O's wise, that ever lived, I wonder how it would have turned out if he would have showed up at Indiana in 1971 with that greatest, I guess you call it a beautiful mind for basketball, and instead of winning through scaring the hell out of everybody, what would have happened if he'd have showed players that he cared about them, and it may be when you played for him. And the thing that stuck out to me was your reason why you wanted, for him to be proud of you. And to me, I would never want my kids to tell me they want me, or that they want me to be proud of them because I'm really successful. What I want my kids to tell me is that they played for me because they wanted me to be proud of them because of how much we love each other. And that's not some liberal BS, because I'm nowhere near that. But I know this. I've interviewed a bunch of guys that played for guys like Bum Phillips, Dick Vermeil, Tom Flores, and every one of these guys, when you bring up their former coach, all they talk about is how much they loved that man and how much that man loved them. And I think in the end, it is very sad that you have to defend the way somebody you love treated you. I think that's very sad. And You know, I feel bad about the way I defended him all those years. Because everything I've learned over the last 30 years about how to interact with people and deal with people, he was the exact opposite. And yeah, he may have won some games, but it ain't worth it. And it wasn't worth it for the University of Indiana to be embarrassed like that at the end. And I don't know when this started, but I know from watching that film and really thinking about it and watching those assistant coaches walk by that it wasn't the first time it happened.
No.
Yeah, well, and I'll say this. First off, in defense of what you're saying, you know, how Knight got to by the time Todd got to him and afterwards, you don't let it, I should use this phrase before, you don't let a dog drink out of your toilet for 29 years and put the lid down. You know, the dog doesn't understand that. You know, he's used to drinking out of the toilet. So by letting Knight get away with what he did in 71 and then all of a sudden stopping it in 2001 or when it started going downhill, that was on the university.
A grown man knows when he's doing right and when he's doing wrong. And if he is not man enough to figure that out and take care of it, Steve, that's a problem. You can't say that a 30-year-old man's being allowed to do this, so of course he's going to get even worse. No. Somebody that is selfish, I mean, I just don't buy this that much anymore.
Mike, I've never in my life thought that Coach Knight didn't love me or care about me. I've never, I don't think that Todd probably will tell you the same thing.
This is the thing. When
I've never felt that pain
and
or what.
So that's never entered my mind. It's when you talked about you wanting to be proud of you, that's what I expected to hear. Man, it's not to rip you. It's just
you did. You always it's why you were fighting. How hard you were fighting. You wanted to be proud of you.
But it's not the.
You went out every day wanting to make you proud.
Though it was because he was successful, and you knew you'd win if you did it the right way. And that's not to rip you because maybe you didn't understand the question. But to me, I always wanted my dad to be proud of me because I loved my dad. That's the only reason I could ever find why I would want somebody to be proud of me.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, Knight was not for everybody. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I've said that all along. He was not for everybody. And I don't want to make this about me. I have not as many issues with Knight as a lot of people do.
It's not about you because I think this, Steve. I think that things were a lot different. Like I said, when I look at it, and you look at how many players before 1984, say, there weren't a lot of starters that were leaving Indiana. When you get to Todd's period from 1985 on, that's when you see them start to leave. And, you know, that's when you hear players.
And that's when you began to see cultural changes and everything, too, about how discipline was perceived and how things were handled. You started to see a shift in cultures and everything like that. It was different. It was definitely different. How I played for Knight, how Todd played for Knight are two different eras completely. And it's hard to compare apples to oranges. So I get that. I'm fine with that. And that's why I don't disrespect anybody who had, you know, a different opinion than I have. And I don't want anybody to disrespect my opinion of it. It's just I got something different out of it than other people did. Todd got something different out of it. Ricky Callaway did. Neil Reed got something different out of it.
And the only thing I was saying there was this. I completely believe you believe what you believe, and what happened, happened. And I completely believe that what Todd said happened. I don't have any problem with that. I was just giving my opinion from a fan who loved Indiana basketball, who loved Bobby Knight.
And there's the key word, Mike. You're a fan. Yeah. You weren't in the locker room. You weren't at the good times. You weren't there. You weren't there around the things. And I think Todd will tell you stories, too. And we're going to let Todd talk here because this is not about me. I don't want to make this about you and me.
I never said it was. You're just the one that responded when I said it.
Okay, but you're a fan, and that's the problem. Most of the people that talk about these things are fans or reporters who weren't there 24/7, 365. So I respect Todd's opinion because Todd was there 24/7, 365. So, Todd, let's get back to you. Ask Todd a question. Get me out of this real quick.
All right.
I really
Todd,
don't want to be here.
Number one, it was your idea, Steve. Be quiet. Number one.
No. I want to be here. But this is Todd. This is Todd's opportunity.
All right.
Not mine.
This is the thing. I know, Todd, you wrote a book. You want to tell everybody where they can find that book?
Let's get back to Todd. You want to tell your story about why you wrote the book?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. That's why I was bringing up the book now, and then I was going to bring up the book at the end.
Shut up.
But go ahead.
Now you got me the book fired up.
The book is called Jadlow on the Rebound, and is co-authored with Tom Brew, who's a longtime journalist and sports writer.
Great journalist, too. Very good journalist.
Florida Sentinel, and he helped me write it. You can find it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or really about any outlet. You can go on the web and get a hold of the book. But I went through
what drove you
to
write the book?
What drove me to write it?
Yeah.
I had always thought about writing a book, and then I went through a really tough time in my life, through some personal experiences that gave me a lot of time to think about mistakes I've made and things that I've done that really helped me in concluding that, I really need to write this book in terms of, if I can help one person not go through some of the things that I went through, then it'll all be worth it. But which kind of leads you to my story, and which is kind of what I do today. I spend my time speaking for a nonprofit organization. I speak about 200. I give about 200 talks a year, from grade school to middle school, high school, to universities, to corporations, to about everywhere. But I was that kid that grew up in Santa Kansas. I had this big dream of being a pro basketball player, and you hear all the naysayers, "Oh, you can't do that, kids from Kansas. It's impossible." And I had these weird behaviors or tics back then. They thought I had Tourette's syndrome. That just created an immense amount of bullying and picking on and tormenting as a young kid. So it kind of put me against the world, saying, I'm going to prove to people one day that I am somebody, that I do matter in this life. And it kind of put me against the world in terms of my mentality and personality, and in terms of, I always tell kids the greatest gift I ever gave myself was the ability to believe in myself regardless of what I was going through. And I think I got that tough skid from all this bullying that when I was a young child. But, as I go on, I get the opportunity. I go to Indiana. I play for this incredible coach. I learn valuable lessons. I learn more about the game of life than truly about basketball, and some of the experience I've shared in my book as well of what it was like to play each year and what each year was like. And there's some great experiences in the book, and there are some experiences that people are going to read and say, wow, how did he get through that? And that's why I tell people it's a different era that we live in today. Today it's, you put your hands on the kid or verbally abuse them, and it's abuse. Back then I called it tough love. So I go through my years at IU, had a great career from what I perceived, and then went on to play professionally for 12 years all over the world. I retired from basketball. I get into orthopedic medicine. I go to school for just about 5 years. Started out in sports medicine, flying to Warsaw, Indiana, working for a company called Biomed. Learned how to do every sports-related type of surgery there was. Working for Biomed, and have our opportunity to move up to a company called Zimmer there in Warsaw. Went back to school for another 2 years to learn how to do total joint reconstruction, both primary and revision cases. In terms of, I'd be the one to go in with the surgeon and bring the implants and just make sure the surgery goes okay in the operating room. But my role got even more expanded here in Kansas City as I worked primarily at the University of Kansas, and so I'd have all the residents, the attendings would go start in another room and say, Todd, walk the resident through the surgery. If there's any questions, come get me, but just make sure they listen to what you say. And I did that. I went back for a year and got trauma trained, so for 13 years, I worked in orthopedic surgery, helping replace joints, shoulders, hips, and knees, and trauma cases. In 2012, something happened that completely changed my life. I went on a hunting trip with a couple of Chiefs players, Priest Holmes and Tony Richardson, which were close friends of mine. We went on a hunting trip to San Antonio, and we came back, and as we were driving home from the airport, we were on the highway and construction traffic stopped. And unfortunately, a semi behind us didn't stop. Hit us going 50 miles an hour as we were sitting still in the car. From that, I had a severe TBI. I lost all my short-term memory. I mean, it was a daily struggle to remember anything. My long-term memory really didn't affect. Short-term in times of doing a daily exercise, in terms of having conversations with people, I really struggled. I had to go through speech therapy and pathology for about a year to try to retrain myself how to talk and to remember. And 6 months later, I tried to go back to work, and something I absolutely love and just thrived in the environment, high pressure situations. Me operating surgeon turned to me and said, "Gosh damn it, this isn't working. What do I need to do now?" I went from being a person who thought I could talk anybody out of any situation, any surgery, to walk in surgery now, forgetting how to do the most primary basic steps of the surgery. And I find myself reading technique manuals before I walk into the surgery because I couldn't remember how to do them, something I'd done thousands of times over. Thus, that ended that career. I couldn't work anymore. I had severe memory issues. I'd kind of grown up, during my professional life, living in the party scene, doing cocaine and running around with, I could say names of NBA All-Stars that would shock you, to where I'd go to parties with them, doing that stuff, and just kind of live that party life, and always told myself, knowing it was wrong, that once I retired from basketball, I wasn't going to do it anymore. But it kind of spilled over into my professional life, to where, after a long day's work, the surgeon and I would go and we continue that lifestyle. But after that accident, it rendered me, I was in a state of, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to work. My basketball career was over with. I didn't know if I had the mental capacity to be able to do anything anymore. I became extremely depressed and started drinking. I never really liked alcohol, liked the taste of it. Found myself drinking vodka in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and at the same time driving. Normal Todd never would have did that. I still struggle with, how did all this happen? But to put a long story short, I get pulled over and get a DUI. I'd be back on the highway an hour later with a drink still in that cup holder, and drive away drinking that drink like nothing ever happened. And in 6 months, I got several DUIs, and the last one was enough to where they sent me to jail and weren't going to let me out of jail. And there's a whole other story behind that, but it kind of saved my life, because I was in such a dark, deep hole that truly, I remember I was on 14 different types of medications, from Alzheimer's medications to pain, to anxiety, to depression, trying to get myself right after that accident. I think I was drinking, just trying to end my life. And, there was times that I prayed, just say, I hope I don't wake up in the morning. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I make long story short, these DUIs end up sending me to jail. The DA in the election year decided he was going to make an example out of me, and rightfully so, he did. He sent me to jail. Normally, the person spends a few days in there, and nobody wanted to hear what I'd been through, and that I became an example. But in reality, it saved my life, because I was truly on a path to killing myself and wanting to die. But I ended up going to jail for 2 years. First year I sat in jail. It became, you talk about a humiliating experience. Somebody had never been in trouble before. Obviously, I hit some adversity in my life and I didn't handle it right. That's the only way I can look at it. But it gave me a lot of time to think. And for some reason, at the end of the first year, the district attorneys offered me a chance to go to a behavioral modification program for 5 months. If I do that, they'd waive the second year of jail. I said, sign me up, because at that point I hadn't seen the lights of outside. I hadn't smelled fresh air, take for granted the air that we breathe, the way we live our lives, how we go to sleep at nighttime. We wake up, we eat when we want to eat, we shower when we want to shower. Those weren't any luxuries that I had. And took a lot of stuff for life and granted. I go into this program, and all I heard, again, were counselors telling me, because this program becomes all about you admitting to yourself you're either an addict or an alcoholic. I didn't feel I was either one of them. I lived a crazy life, which I made these choices to party and live this lifestyle. I don't think that it ever controlled me or directed me. It's just a lifestyle I lived. So I refused to call myself either. Say, I made poor choices. These counselors all told me the same thing. You'll be right back in here. You're not going to change, and so forth. And I remember sitting in a group one day, and as we were going around the small group saying, what are your plans after? I said, I think I want to share my story with kids. Share my story. And I'll never forget, one of the guys in the group looked at me and said, why would anybody want to listen to you? You're nothing but a freaking drunk. And there's something in the tone or how he said it to me just motivated me. I guess that athletic, competitive drive. In my mind, I felt like I was back to this 8, 9, 10, 12, 15-year-old kid being bullied again, saying, you can't do this. So I pay the price. I do the time. I get out. I start a foundation, and I start knocking on doors and start speaking, going to schools, trying to speak at assemblies to share my story. And I started getting more and more calls. That time, I'd reached out to Tom Brew, and I told him my story of everything I went through. This was right after he wrote Missing Banners. And he said, this is a story that needs to be told. And so we sat down, and 6 or 8 months, it took us hundreds of hours of interviews, and I wrote, and he would revise it, and he'd write, and I'd go through it. Anyway, and I came out with that book. During the time that I was going around getting these speaking engagements myself, and actually I went back to an IU basketball reunion when Tom Crean was there. He became a good friend of mine, very positive. It was the first time I went back to IU in 30 years, because I was one of those guys that was very distraught by how everything ended with Coach Knight. I was always going to defend him to the end. Didn't think it was handled right, and part of me changing who I was is letting go of resentments, and it's time for me to move on. So I went back to IU, seen everybody I'd seen, got to see a lot of the former players, and met a guy named Brad Winters who knew the people at Sports World, which was founded by Doc Esselman, the team chaplain for the NFL. Who started a program in which he sends professional athletes to schools throughout the U.S. to share their stories and their experiences, more importantly, their failures in life and what they learned from them, and how to not make the same mistakes, and to pass that message on to these kids. Because for some reason, when a former athlete walks into a school compared to somebody else, these kids listen. I mean, most of my assemblies, whether it's 100 there or whether it's 2,500 there, you can hear a dime drop. I had the opportunity to start going to speak for this nonprofit Sports World. I speak about 200 times a year, speak 12 to 14 times in 3 days, spring and fall, 4 of them, which I travel speaking, sharing my story in hopes of getting these kids to understand that there's nothing in their life that they can't achieve. It doesn't matter where they're from. The Lord is an important aspect in our life. There is a spiritual component to this, and to try to open their hearts to God as well if they haven't allowed him in. And so that's what I've been doing, and I've been blessed now for 3 years. I've been speaking for my foundation, the Give Back Foundation, and for Sports World, in which I get out and I share my story and my message of hope. And more importantly, there's a saying that was in the locker room at Indiana that I share with these kids. Some of the greatest successes in life are learned from failure. And one of the signs of that locker room said that the only worthy response to failure is a renewed dedication to success. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Failed miserably. I still question myself, how did that happen? But it's something I live with every day, and I sincerely enjoy now going out sharing my story in hopes of making a difference in some of these kids' lives. These kids deal with a lot these days, from suicide to drugs to the alcohol to family issues, and I can tell you heartbreaking story after heartbreaking story of a parent or student who's committed suicide, or one I've helped talk down from the ledge of committing suicide because of the things they're going through. So I've got the privilege of doing that, and that's kind of what I'm doing today, as well as speaking. I still get a lot of calls about my book that I wrote, sharing my experiences as well, in which I'll speak to them as well. So I've been really blessed in that respect.
All right, so
that's
once
kind
again,
of my story.
Once again, everybody can get Jadlow on the Rebound. I assume you can get it on Amazon. Just do a search on the internet. You can find it. It was written with veteran sports writer Tom Brew. Also, I know I've seen this, An Evening of Candid Conversation with IU's Todd Jadlow. If somebody is interested in booking you for a speaking engagement, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of me, quite honestly, they can email me at todd.jadlow@gmail.com. Or I can give out a telephone number of 913-396-3612. Yeah, 913-396-3612. Either way, they can get a hold of me through the email account or by the phone there, and somebody's always going to get back to them immediately.
All right, Todd, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight and sitting down and talking with me and Steve about your career, about your after career and the 30 for 30. We'd love to have you back on sometime.
Man, I really appreciate it. It's been a blessing to stay in touch with Steve here, and I really appreciate you guys having me on and sharing our experiences, both positive and negative. It's still an experience, and I'm like Steve, love Coach Knight, and what happened. We all just move forward from it.
All right, Steve, any final words?
What's amazing to me in wrapping up is it through the ages of all the different players I've ever spoken to, I think Todd would attest to this too, is how similar the stories are. So that the message there is that it's not how do I phrase it? There's a method to his madness. Mm-hmm. And I've always used that phrase, and I've heard it used by other people since. And that may be one of the ones I actually take credit for coining, because I'd never heard it before. I'd used it on air several times. There's a methodology to his madness, and I think that if you understand that it's a motivational tactic that is not as accepted today as it was when I played, and to a lesser degree when Todd played. But you understand that there's not vilification there on Knight as much as just an unacceptance of his practice for coaching. I don't think Bob Knight's a bad man. I think he's a great man. I think he and Mike, which you can't disagree with, and we've had this discussion before too. Everything he's ever won, he's won with integrity. He's never cheated. I don't think the man's ever cheated.
When we're doing this, I just wanted to be fair and equal. That's the only thing I was shooting for.
And I'm not trying to
wait a second.
Your opinion.
I do have one problem, a major problem with something you said. Do you want to know what it is?
I probably didn't coin method.
You said that you coined a method to the madness.
Yeah.
Now, do you realize that William Shakespeare used that line for the first time other in Hamlet in 1602? I think you missed it by about 400 years, Steve.
And here's the problem, Mike. I've never freaking read a Shakespeare book in my life. Which last night there was a whole category in Jeopardy on Shakespeare, and nobody in my family could answer any one of the questions. I'm saying, I got to go back and read all of Shakespeare's plays because I've never read Shakespeare.
Now, this is the thing, though. This is the thing, because as soon as you said this, you know what I did? Right. Because I like to fact check everything you do, because you're a little like CNN. And I just put Method to Madness origin.
Trump. I don't believe in fact checking.
Method to Madness origin. I thought for sure it would say Steve Risley, August 2018 on Survive in Advance. But it didn't. It said Hamlet, written by English playwright William Shakespeare in the year 1602.
Okay.
So then automatically, you know what I'm thinking? Steve's full of shit again.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. But you see it. It's funny how we were, like I said, we were watching Jeopardy, an entire category on Shakespeare's plays, and I'm thinking, none of us, Ross, Tia, or myself, could not answer one Shakespeare question. Like, that sucks, because Shakespeare's the greatest playwright of all time.
All right, what I'm going to tell you is this. What I'm going to tell you is this. The next time you watch it, Shakespeare comes up, just rotate back and forth saying Macbeth and Hamlet. You'll get at least 2 out of 5 right.
Yeah, I know. You do. And you know what? You're exactly right. It's either Macbeth or Hamlet. There's 2 best plays, that and Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, so, I forgot about that one. But you probably saw the movie.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I did see the movie, with my girlfriend. I'm forced to go see that one, which I didn't want to go see.
All right, Todd.
The Capulets and the Montagues.
Yeah, you're on a roll now. Well, you know there's a Hamlet and Macbeth and Othello are all on movies, so maybe you could watch them. And I
also know that the Playboy Mansion had a party every year called the Midsummer Night's Dream, which was another Shakespeare play.
I thought it was called a Midsummer Night's Dream.
That's what I always wanted to be invited to. Hell, we live 20 miles from the Playboy Mansion. I can't get in the front gate.
Did you say it was called a Midsummer Night's Cream?
That's probably what it ended up being, but it was a Midsummer Night's Dream.
All right, let's get off here because we always tap out of the show. We always tap out of the show when it starts to deteriorate. So it's deteriorated.
Hey, Todd, I really wanted to thank you for taking the time to talk. I know you and I have not agreed on everything over the course of time on
I still
things,
respect everybody's opinion.
Yeah, no, and I think we all share a common bond on night. We all take different experiences away from it. I think that's the message here. I think we all agree that the vilification of Neil Reed was a horrible thing that should not have happened.
Right.
How you perceive the incident in looking at the tape,
it doesn't matter.
Again, I go back to what I took away from this revelation, and you're right, Todd. It's the lack of reaction by anybody else on the court that really scares you more than anything, even more so than Knight grabbing him, because I think we've all been grabbed by Knight in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, absolutely.
And that was just a part of the landscape, but it's the lack of reaction and how that affected me when you brought that up, and I started thinking, he's right. Nobody reacted. Yeah. They all just kind of, and that's how I looked at my time. I said, when he pulled a stunt on one of us, nobody reacted. We just said, all right, get through it. Let's get through it and move on to the next thing we got to go work on. And maybe that's the numbing of playing for him, that you ended up getting so numb to it all. You didn't, he just was part of the process.
It's another day. Absolutely.
And then Mike brings up the fact that, we want to please him. And see, it all fits together in the big picture.
No, you brought that up. I just asked you why.
Yeah, and it's all great input from everybody. So I think it was a great session. I really thank you for coming on and talking. I think this will play well. This will play well in China.
I think it'll do well. Yep. And Steve, I'm going to get in touch with you over Christmas time when my daughter gets here and see if she can't talk to your son.
Yeah. I know your daughter
about
wants
the same
my
age,
son's in the industry, and he can open some doors for her.
That'd be
I know
great.
He's done it from some other people, and I don't want to put him on the spot.
No, you don't have to, but don't.
No, we won't.
Do that, but I just think it'd be good for her to get to know him too.
Hey, all you have to do is tell my son that she's modeling somewhere, and
let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let's go ahead and wrap this up, and then you guys can talk when we get done. But thank you, Todd,
and
thank you.
make sure you check out Indiana Basketball Weekly every week or
I
after
will.
every game with me, Colin, Steve Risley. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts. You'll find the grueling truth. So for Todd Jadlow, Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the grueling truth, where the legends speak.